I was 14 when everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd just come home from school with a report card that wasn't perfect. My dad was sitting in the living room, his face already red before I even walked through the door. He'd had a bad day at work. I could tell from the way his jaw was clenched, the way his fingers drummed against the armrest of his worn leather chair. "Let me see it," he said, his voice low and controlled. That's what scared me most. Not the yelling, but the quiet before the storm. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I handed him the paper with trembling hands. 3 A's, 2 B's, and 1 C in algebra. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what he expected. My dad had always been strict about grades, about excellence, about being the best. "Second place is just the first loser," he used to say, thinking it was motivational. He stared at that C for what felt like an eternity. Then, without warning, he stood up. I barely had time to register what was happening before his hand connected with the side of my face. The slap echoed through the house like a gunshot. My cheek burned, and tears immediately sprang to my eyes, not just from the pain, but from the shock. My dad had never hit me before. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice still eerily calm. "You're better than this. I raised you better than this." I stood there, frozen, my hand pressed against my stinging cheek. My mom was at work. My little sister was at dance practice. It was just him and me, and suddenly, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. "Go to your room," he ordered. "And don't come down until you figure out how you're going to fix this." I ran upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and cried into my pillow. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that he'd been stressed, that maybe I deserved it for not trying harder. Looking back now, I can see how quickly I began making excuses for him, how easily I slipped into the pattern of blaming myself. That night at dinner, he acted like nothing had happened. He asked about my sister's dance recital, complimented my mom's cooking, and even smiled at something funny on TV. But when his eyes met mine, there was a warning in them, a clear message: don't tell. And I didn't. What happened next changed everything about my family. The secret I kept would eventually destroy us all, but not in the way you'd think. Keep watching to find out what I discovered about my father that made everything make sense. The hitting didn't stop after that first time. In fact, it got worse. Over the next few months, it became almost routine. Bad grade? Hit. Talked back? Hit. Stayed out 15 minutes past curfew? Hit. My father had found a new way to communicate with me, and I learned to read his moods like a survival manual. I became an expert at hiding. I wore long sleeves even in summer to cover the bruises on my arms. I perfected the art of explaining away the occasional visible mark. I'd tripped, I'd bumped into a door, I was clumsy at basketball practice. The lies came easier than I ever thought possible. The worst part wasn't even the physical pain. It was the way it twisted my mind. I started walking on eggshells in my own home, constantly scanning my father's face for signs of anger, adjusting my behavior to try to prevent the next incident. I became a smaller version of myself, quieter, more careful, always apologizing. My mom noticed I was different, but she didn't know why. "You're so withdrawn lately," she'd say, concern creasing her forehead. "Is everything okay at school? Are kids bullying you?" I wanted to scream, yes, but the bully lives here. Instead, I just shrugged and said I was fine. How could I tell her? My dad was her husband, her partner, the man she'd built a life with. And he was so careful. He never left marks where anyone could easily see them. He never hit me when anyone else was home. He was methodical, controlled, and that scared me more than if he'd just lost his temper. My little sister, Emma, was only 8, and somehow she remained untouched by his rage. She was his princess, his perfect little girl who could do no wrong. I was grateful for that, at least. I'd take 100 hits if it meant she stayed safe. But it also made me feel even more isolated. Was it just me? Was I the problem? I threw myself into my studies, determined to be perfect, thinking that if I could just be good enough, smart enough, careful enough, it would stop. My grades shot up to straight A's. I joined clubs, volunteered, did everything I could to be the model son. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. Because I was beginning to realize something terrifying. My father didn't hit me because of what I did. He hit me because of something broken inside him, something that had nothing to do with me at all. The truth about why my father was really doing this was buried in his past, a past I was about to uncover in the most unexpected way. What I found would change how I saw him forever. It all came to a head on my 16th birthday. I'd made it 2 years living in this nightmare, 2 years of silence and secrets. My mom had planned a small party, just family and a few close friends. I didn't want it, but saying no would have raised questions I couldn't answer. The party was going well. My friends are laughing, my mom had made my favorite cake, and even my dad seemed to be in a good mood. For a few hours, I let myself relax and just be a normal teenager celebrating a normal birthday. Then my friend Marcus accidentally knocked over a vase, one of my dad's expensive collectibles. It shattered into 100 pieces on the hardwood floor. Everyone froze. "It's okay," my mom said quickly, grabbing a broom. "Accidents happen." But I saw my dad's face change. I knew that look. And I knew what was coming, even if it wouldn't happen until everyone left. The rest of the party passed in a blur. My friends eventually went home, my mom cleaned up, and Emma went to bed. I stayed in my room, dreading the inevitable confrontation. It came around midnight. My dad opened my door, without knocking. "Downstairs. Now." My heart pounded as I followed him to the living room. My mom had already gone to bed. "That vase cost $2,000, he said, his voice that familiar, dangerous calm. $2,000, destroyed because you and your idiot friends don't know how to behave in a civilized home." "Dad, it was an accident." The backhand came fast. I tasted blood from where my teeth cut my cheek. "Don't make excuses." His voice rose now, control slipping. "You're responsible for your guests. You're responsible for—" "Stop." The voice came from the stairs. My mom stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror. She'd seen everything. Time seemed to freeze. My dad and I both stared at her. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood. The long sleeves in summer. The flinching. The way I'd changed. It all clicked into place on her face. "How long?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "How long has this been happening?" I couldn't speak. My dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. "How long?" She was crying now, screaming, and Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, frightened and confused. The secret was out. Everything was about to change. My mom's discovery should have been the end of it, but what happened next shocked everyone, including me. The truth my father had been hiding went deeper than any of us could have imagined. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon. My mom made my dad leave that night. She packed a bag for him and told him to go to his brother's house while we figured things out. I'd never seen her so furious, so determined, so protective. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like maybe I wasn't alone in this anymore. The next few days were chaos. My mom took me to the doctor to document my injuries. She called a therapist. She called a lawyer. She held me while I finally cried, really cried, about everything I'd been through. Emma was confused and scared, asking why Daddy had to leave, and my mom tried to explain in terms an 8-year-old could understand. But through all of this, one question kept gnawing at me. Why? Why had my father, who'd been a normal, loving dad for the first 14 years of my life, suddenly become violent? What had changed? The answer came from the most unexpected source, my paternal grandmother. She showed up at our house 3 days after my dad left. She was 82, sharp as a tack, and she'd driven 2 hours from her assisted living facility because she'd heard what happened. My mom was reluctant to let her in at first, but Grandma Jean was insistent. "I need to talk to the boy," she said firmly. "There are things he needs to know. Things his mother needs to know." We sat in the living room, my mom, Grandma Jean, and me. Emma was at a friend's house. "What I'm about to tell you," Grandma Jean began, her wrinkled hands shaking slightly, "I should have shared a long time ago. But we didn't talk about these things back then. We buried them, pretended they didn't happen, and hoped they'd stay buried. She took a deep breath. Your grandfather, your father's father, he was a violent man. He beat your father regularly from the time he was about your age until he left for college. I didn't stop it. I was too scared, too dependent on him financially. It's my greatest shame. The room went silent. My mom's hand found mine and squeezed. Your father swore he'd never be like his dad, Grandma Jean continued, tears now streaming down her face. He swore it to me. And for years, he wasn't. He was a good father to you kids. But about 2 years ago, do you remember? He was passed over for that promotion at work. I nodded slowly. I remembered. He'd been bitter about it for weeks. That's when it started, wasn't it? Grandma Jean looked at me with knowing, sad eyes. Yes, I whispered. His father used to do the same thing. When life got hard, when he felt like he was failing, he'd take it out on your dad. It's a cycle, you see. A terrible, vicious cycle. And despite all his promises, your father became exactly what he feared most. Understanding where the violence came from didn't excuse it, but it opened the door to a decision that would tear our family apart and ultimately begin to heal it. What we decided next changed all of our lives. After Grandma Jean left, my mom and I sat in silence for a long time. The revelation about my grandfather explained so much, but it also complicated everything. My dad wasn't just a monster. He was a victim too, trapped in a cycle he couldn't break. But understanding someone and forgiving them are two very different things. What do you want to do? My mom finally asked me, her voice gentle. This is your decision too. You're the one he hurt. I thought about it for days. Part of me wanted to never see him again, to press charges, to make him pay for what he'd done to me. But another part, a part one almost hated myself for, remembered the father he used to be. The dad who taught me to ride a bike, who took me fishing, who read me bedtime stories when I was little. That dad felt like a different person entirely. I think he needs help, I said finally. Real help. Not just anger management classes, but actual therapy to deal with what happened to him. My mom nodded slowly. And what about us? What about you? I need therapy too, I admitted. And I can't live with him. Not now. Maybe not ever. But if he's willing to really do the work, to really change, maybe someday we can have some kind of relationship. Not what we had before, but something. The conditions were laid out clearly when my parents met with their lawyers. My dad would move out permanently. He would attend intensive therapy, specifically trauma-focused therapy to address his childhood abuse. He would attend anger management. He would have supervised visitation only, and only when I was ready. And he would have no contact with Emma until I felt it was safe. To my surprise, he agreed to everything. No fighting, no excuses. When I finally saw him 2 weeks later in the therapist's office, a neutral space, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. I'm sorry, he said, and he was crying. I'd never seen my father cry before. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve any of that. None of it. I became my father, and that's something I have to live with for the rest of my life. I didn't know what to say. Sorry felt insufficient for 2 years of fear and pain. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said honestly. But I hope you can get better. Not for me, but for you. Because carrying that pain and anger around, it's destroying you. I can see that now. The therapist helped us navigate the conversation, kept it productive, prevented it from spiraling. It wasn't closure. That would take much longer, but it was a beginning. The path to healing wasn't straight or simple, and there were setbacks that nearly broke us all. But then something happened that forced my father to confront his demons in a way therapy never could. 6 months into therapy, my dad seemed to be making progress. He'd found an apartment, was attending his sessions religiously, and had started a support group for abuse survivors. I'd agreed to a few supervised visits, and while they were awkward and painful, they weren't terrible. He was trying, genuinely trying, to be better. Then Emma changed everything. My little sister, who'd been largely sheltered from the worst of it, had been watching everything unfold. She was 9 now, old enough to understand more than we'd given her credit for. One day, She came to me with tears streaming down her face. "Are you and Daddy ever going to be okay?" she asked, climbing onto my bed. "I miss how we used to be. I miss when we were all happy." Her innocent question hit me like a truck. Emma had lost something too, not her safety like I had, but her family, her sense of normalcy. She was collateral damage in a war she hadn't signed up for. "I don't know, I said honestly, pulling her into a hug. "Daddy did some really bad things to me. Things that hurt me a lot. But he's trying to get better." "I know," she said into my shoulder. "Mommy explained it to me. That Grandpa hurt Daddy when he was young, and it made Daddy hurt you. But you know what?" "What?" "I think Daddy needs you to forgive him. Not for him, but so you're not angry forever like he was. I don't want you to be angry when you grow up. I don't want you to hit your kids someday." Out of the mouths of babes. My 9-year-old sister had just articulated what months of therapy had been circling around. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about freeing myself from the cycle. That conversation led me to make a decision. I asked to meet with my dad again, this time with Emma present and with both of our therapists there. "I want to know everything," I told him once we were all seated. "About what Grandpa did to you. About how you felt. About why you couldn't stop yourself from doing the same thing to me. All of it. No more secrets." My dad looked terrified, but he nodded. And over the next 2 hours, he told us his story. He talked about the fear, the shame, the way he'd learned to read his father's moods just like I'd learned to read his. He talked about how he'd promised himself he'd be different, better, but how the stress and disappointment of that missed promotion had triggered something in him, a rage he didn't know he was carrying. He talked about seeing his father in the mirror and hating himself for it, but not knowing how to stop. "Every time I hit you," he said, his voice breaking, "it was like I was watching myself from outside my body. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was doing exactly what had been done to me. But I couldn't stop. It was like the pain and anger I'd buried for 30 years just exploded out of me. And you were there, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Hearing my father's story was devastating and illuminating all at once. But it was what happened next, in a moment of raw vulnerability, that would determine whether our family could ever truly heal. After that session, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. I began to see my father not as a monster, but as a broken person who'd broken me in turn. It didn't excuse anything, but it made the path forward a little clearer. The next year was hard. I continued therapy, working through my trauma, learning to set boundaries, rebuilding my self-esteem. My dad continued his work too, and our therapist eventually suggested we try family therapy, all of us together, including Emma. Those sessions were intense. My mom talked about the guilt she felt for not seeing what was happening sooner. Emma talked about feeling caught between loving her dad and being angry at him for hurting her brother. I talked about the nightmares, the anxiety, the way I still flinch sometimes when people move too quickly around me. And my dad listened. Really listened. He didn't make excuses or try to minimize anything. He just accepted responsibility and kept working to be better. One breakthrough came about 18 months after everything came out. We were in a family session and the therapist asked me what I needed from my father to feel safe around him. "I need to know that you've really changed," I said. "Not just that you're not hitting people, but that you've actually dealt with your trauma. That you're not just a ticking time bomb waiting to go off again." My dad nodded slowly. Then he did something unexpected. "Would you come with me to visit my father?" he asked. "He's in a nursing home now. He's got dementia. He doesn't remember a lot of things, including what he did to me. I visit him once a month, and it's the hardest thing I do. But I think if you saw me dealing with him, saw how I've tried to break the cycle even with him, maybe it would help." I was skeptical, but I agreed. The following week, my dad and I drove to the nursing home together. It was the first time we'd been alone since before everything happened, and the car ride was tense. My grandfather was a frail old man in a wheelchair, nothing like the monster I'd imagined. He smiled when he saw my dad, though his eyes were vacant. "Robert," he said cheerfully. "Good to see you, son. Who's this young man?" "This is your grandson, Dad," my father said gently. "My son." We sat with him for an hour. My dad was patient, kind even, redirecting when my grandfather got confused, helping him eat his lunch, treating him with dignity despite everything he'd done. On the drive home, I asked him, "How do you do it? How do you take care of him after what he did to you?" My dad was quiet for a long moment, because holding on to that anger was killing me. It turned me into him. And if I want to truly break the cycle, I have to find a way to let it go, not forget, but let go. Plus, he's sick now. He's not the man who hurt me anymore. He's just a confused old man who needs help. It was the most profound thing my father had ever said to me. That visit changed something fundamental in how I saw my father and his journey. But the real test of whether we could move forward came when I had to make the hardest decision of my life. I'm 21 now, 5 years removed from the worst of it. I'm in college studying psychology. Maybe it's cliché, but I want to help other families break cycles of abuse. My relationship with my father will never be what it was, but it's something. We talk regularly. He comes to family dinners. He's been sober, in therapy, and violence-free for 5 years. Last month, he asked if I'd be willing to speak at a workshop he helps run for men dealing with anger and abuse issues. Men who, like him, came from violent homes and are trying to do better. I thought about saying no. It would mean telling my story to strangers, opening old wounds, revisiting pain I've worked hard to process. But then I thought about that day in the nursing home, about watching my father choose compassion over anger, forgiveness over resentment. So I said yes. Standing in front of 30 men, some court-ordered, some there voluntarily, I told them everything. About the fear, the shame, the silence. About how abuse doesn't just hurt in the moment but ripples out, affecting every relationship, every decision, every part of who you become. And then I told them about my father. "The man who abused me is in this room," I said, watching my dad in the back row, tears already streaming down his face. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I'd ever speak to him again, let alone be here with him now, I would have said absolutely not. But here's what I've learned. Hurt people, but healing people can heal people. I paused, making eye contact with different men around the room. My father broke the cycle. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. And it required him to face the most painful parts of his past and do the hard work of genuine change. It required my whole family to do that work. And here's the truth. Some relationships can't be saved. Sometimes the damage is too great. But change is possible if you're willing to do more than just say you're sorry. You have to be sorry. You have to understand why you did what you did. And you have to commit to something different every single day. After I finished, several men came up to thank me. One man, probably in his 50s, said, "My son hasn't spoken to me in 3 years because of my anger. Do you think, is there hope for us?" I glanced at my father, who was waiting respectfully by the door. If you do the work, real, honest, painful work, maybe. But it has to be on his terms, when he's ready. Your job is to become someone safe to be around, whether or not he ever chooses to come back. That night, my dad and I got dinner together, just the two of us for the first time in years. Over burgers and fries, he told me something I'll never forget. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me the chance to be better. For not writing me off completely. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I know our relationship will never be what it should have been. But you've given me something I never thought I'd have. Hope that the damage can stop with me. That maybe I can be part of the solution instead of just part of the problem." "You are part of the solution now," I told him. "But Dad, never stop working on yourself. Never think you've arrived. This is a lifelong commitment." "I know," he said, "and I'll keep at it every day for the rest of my life." Today, I'm not defined by what happened to me. I'm defined by how I've chosen to move forward. I'm in a healthy relationship with someone who knows my whole story. I have good friends, dreams for the future, and most importantly, I've broken the cycle. If you're experiencing abuse, please tell someone. If you're the one causing harm, please get help. Cycles can be broken, but only if we have the courage to face them honestly and do the work to change. If this story resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you dealt with family trauma or generational cycles of abuse? Your story matters, and sharing it might help someone else find the courage to break their own cycle. Remember, healing is possible, change is possible, and you're not alone in this journey. See you in the next video, and remember, be kind to yourself and others.